Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. Today I want to make a video that looks at the known facts of the Jayme Closs kidnapping case. The reason I want to look at that is to make comparisons between what has gone on in that case and what I have experienced. And I do this with all due respect to Jayme. Having dealt with people who have experienced trauma that you, the viewer, cannot really imagine. Living in a car for 4 years while working for a living, for example. Believe me, the last thing she's going to worry about is a homeless guy, quote, exploiting her situation to make some perfectly valid points that need to be made. She's back to enjoying her life. God bless her. If you're not aware of what happened there, I'll explain it in just a moment. The first thing I want to point out, though, oh wait. Oh, sorry, got the wrong slide up here, don't we? Actually, you know what? As long as that slide's there, let me make a comment real quick. Okay, you know, according to this news report, this toddler died outside in the freezing cold, life-threatening cold. The reason I find that relevant is because the state of Minnesota has determined that these temperatures are not life-threatening to human beings. And the evidence of this comes from none other than the Minnesota Department of Health. I mean, where are you going to get better experts than that? If you watch my previous video entitled "The Minnesota Department of Health is Sick," you'll find that they were harassing the hotel that I was staying at, threatening to shut it down and such, and just ruining their business, intimidating their customers, their guests, just making life a nightmare for no reason. The hotel was very run down, there's no doubt about it, very run down, but there wasn't anything unhealthy about it. There wasn't mold to speak of. I saw fewer insects in that place throughout the whole times that I was there over the last year, couple years, than I've seen in five-star hotels in one stay. There was absolutely no reason for them to go after this place. Yes, it's run down, but run down is why the cost of it was less, which is why I could afford to stay there. It's called the law of supply and demand. Well, after I put out my video, the Department of Health came to that hotel one more time, but this time, you know, not all the other times they had showed up to harass these people, but the time after I posted my video, this time, of all times, 1 week before Christmas, they shut the hotel down. The consequences of that were all those jobs lost in an instant with no warning. All the people who could only afford to stay there thrown out into the streets, which is why I say, you know, it's 10 degrees. I think it's 10 degrees today. It's gotten as low as about -20, it was certainly with wind chills. It's been a pretty mild winter, but, you know, it's not over yet, and this is not a typical winter. Department of Health seems to think it's just fine for people to be thrown out into the cold. Apparently it is not life-threatening. So I have to question whether this news report about the toddler dying in the cold is maybe that's fake news or something, because by the Department of Health's behavior, by what they've done, not what they're shooting their mouths off about, but what they actually did, throwing all those people out into the cold 1 week before Christmas, they're the Department of Health. They're not going to hurt somebody. So apparently, what they call life-threatening cold in other departments, you know, like the National Weather Service and things like that, apparently they're either, you know, grossly wrong or they're liars, because the Department of Health has no problem throwing people out into the streets, you know, in the middle of winter, Minnesota winter. Another consequence of that is that there's really no place I can go to that I can afford now, at least not 2 days a week. And also, you know, I don't have any family. All the time, what I did was I stayed at that hotel for the most part on my 2 days off, so I could maintain my hygiene and get some semblance of privacy and just relax, get some creative work done. Over the course of a year, I got to know those people, and you could, I would say, you know, they were the closest thing I had to family. I cared about those people. I really cared about them, and they liked me and cared about me. And I go in there one day and they're all gone. They've been thrown out. I'll never see them again. I don't have their numbers. I didn't get to say goodbye to them. Thank you, Minnesota Department of Health, for looking after our well-being. You monstrosities. In my previous video, I was talking about how these people should be held accountable. I am more and more. Now, I know this will never happen. I don't have delusions like this. I know it will not happen. But I speak truth. And sometimes the truth is hard to hear, and the truth is not consistent with the way that the world works, unfortunately, because the world likes lies. Those people at the Department of Health, there should be something akin to Nuremberg trials for those people. That is the severity of what they have done to, I can't even count the number of people they've hurt and how badly they've hurt them, put their lives at risk. There should be something like Nuremberg trials for those people. And remember, at Nuremberg, the excuse everyone used was, I was just following orders. I have a job to do, I did my job, etc., etc., etc. And you know what? That excuse got those people hanged. And this is exactly what the Minnesota Department of Health should experience. But this video is about the Jayme Closs case. Jayme Closs was a 13-year-old girl in Wisconsin, I think her home's in western Wisconsin, but it's pretty, it's not on the east side. So it's basically near Minnesota. The first point I need to make is that everything I've said in these videos about the way that Minnesota operates, the way that it's a cult, and again, that goes back to the Scandinavian origins, perhaps even Ice Age, isolated tribes that fear outsiders. I don't want to get into that here, but the point is Minnesota does not behave like normal people, like the rest of the country. But there's some spillover of that, especially into the Wisconsin area, a bit into northern Iowa. There's some spillover of that kind of behavior, so it's not only Minnesota. Where these events took place, the kidnapping of Jayme Closs took place, are the same basic environment as Minnesota that I've been experiencing while homeless. So I want to make that point perfectly clear first. So Jayme was awakened by, this is on, I think it was October 5th. I think it was October 5th, but it was in October of last year. So Jayme lived, I think she lived alone with her parents, mother and father. So she's awakened at night by a barking dog. There's an intruder dressed in black with a shotgun. Apparently he shot the front door open. Jayme and her mother ran to the bathroom and hid. The father confronted the intruder, and while they were hiding in the bathroom, they heard the gunshot of her father being killed, just shot dead in cold blood. And then this piece of human garbage goes into the bathroom and tells the mother to tape this 13-year-old girl's mouth shut. And then right next to her in the bathtub, he shoots her mother dead right in front of her eyes. This guy put Jayme into the trunk of his car and drove, I think, about 70 miles to his cabin, which is, I think, fairly near the border of Minnesota. And he held her captive in the basement of that cabin for 3 months. 3 months later, last week, January 10th, I believe, this girl, this outstanding girl, escaped. That's the kind of spirit that keeps you alive living in a car for 4 years, when the people around you are like this monster, and they get away with it off camera. God bless that girl. She escaped. And by some miracle out there in the middle of nowhere, she finds this woman walking her dog. Tells her who she is, and they run to a nearby house. The occupants of that house had guns, so they armed themselves to protect from this guy until the police arrived. When the police arrived, they found this guy walking around or driving around, apparently looking for Jayme, and they arrested him. And she was finally safe. That's all we really know at this point. There's been one court appearance with this abductor, this Jake Patterson. $5 million bail set. I don't think he's going to smell fresh air again. That's the story. That's what we know so far. So I want to point out I want to use this story because there are parallels, not direct, obviously. I'm not a 13-year-old girl. I wasn't abducted. Obviously, it's different. But if you think, if you use your mind, you can learn things from stories that have similar foundations, and that's exactly what we have here. Because what happened in her case is very similar to what I've experienced fundamentally in terms of the sheer ruthlessness and the self-absorbed behavior of the people around here. This guy went and kidnapped a girl, just slaughtered her parents right in front of her eyes because other people don't matter to him. It's all about him. What he wants, he gets, he takes, which is what these people do. They don't help me because they don't care about me. They don't care if I live or die. They'll set up a homeless shelter if they get something out of it, if they get a salary or a job or prestige out of it, or professional, if they're able to do their PhD on it, they'll do it then, but they're not just going to help because I went up and said, I need help, please help. They won't do it. They're the same fundamental kind of person as this pile of garbage who kidnapped this girl. So the first category I want to look at here, and yes, you can't see it right now, I've got another car pulled up facing me, just staring at me here in an otherwise empty parking lot. Because when you're homeless, that's what happens. People think it's funny to just come up and stare at you and intimidate you. They don't want the homeless sitting in a car making a video. And there they go. First category I want to look at here is police, legislators, government, and the justice system. In the Jayme Closs case, first point I want to make, I've already made, really. Wisconsin, the western part of Wisconsin is indistinguishable from Minnesota. In fact, a lot of Minnesotans have their cabins in that part of Wisconsin. And it's the same thing. And this person's back again to just stare at me. This is just mind-boggling. You want to see him? You want to see him? Let me show you. Let me show you. See what I mean? Otherwise empty parking lot, and this person just sits there and pulls up and stares at me. This is what I get. This is what I get all the time when I try to do anything. Just sit in a car and mind my own business. So the same psychopathology you're going to see in this Closs case is what I have dealt with these people, like this clown with the car, all the time. The difference is that what I experience occurs off camera. Off camera. This case, because something happened to a 13-year-old girl, it got all kinds of news coverage. Point number two is that the police in this instance had no clues to work with. They had no idea what happened. They had nothing. They had no evidence. And yet, they tried their best. They stayed on the case. They kept with it. They cared about finding this girl and saving her. They didn't give up, even though they had nothing to work with. In my case, and I'm not gonna rehash things. You'll have to watch my other videos to get that, to keep this video's time down. In my case, I had not just abundant evidence, I had an entire website that took me 2 years to create. I had thousands of hours of recordings of my neighbors tormenting and terrorizing me inside my own home. I mean, the amount of evidence I had was, people have been sent to the death penalty with less evidence than what I had. There's not even any comparison. And yet, the police wouldn't do anything. Nothing. Nothing. Not even once would they do anything to help me, despite me having all that evidence. Which is why I'm homeless, which is why I lost everything, as I was tortured and tormented by those neighbors for so many years. They didn't even do their jobs. It was their job to enforce the law, and even when these people broke the law and I could demonstrate it, they did nothing. But with Jayme's case, they had no evidence, they had nothing to go on whatsoever, but they kept sticking with it. They didn't give up. One of these things is not like the other. Meanwhile, when I went to my legislators in Minnesota, I sent out a letter to all 200 legislators. I got 2 responses. One of them just said, no thank you. She got reelected. The second one, the guy said, send me your home address so I can respond to you. I'll send you a letter. So he could respond to my email to him about me being homeless. He wanted my home address. He got reelected. That's Minnesota. Brilliant. Point number 3. In Jayme's case, they started out with, I think within days, they had a reward offered of $25,000 for information to find her. Eventually it went up to $50,000. And in my case, I have no analogy whatsoever, because nobody ever cared enough to help. I have no analogy. There was no reward, there was nothing. I'm sorry. Number 4, the justice system has and will devote incalculable amounts of money, resources, man-hours, effort, scientific investigation, etc., in an effort to ensure justice in this case. The justice system, there are people scurrying about all over the place, investigators, lawyers, paralegals, prosecutors, attorneys. You can't even imagine the amount of resources that are going to go into convicting this guy. In my case, where I've been homeless for 4 years and I was tortured in my own home for about 3 years before that, the justice system has completely ignored my situation, even though, again, I've demonstrated that laws were broken, professionals were absolutely negligent, public servants were corrupt, and there's several perpetrators who are clearly open to lawsuits for liability and damages, and yet I can't get an attorney to help. I can't get anyone to help. Nobody has ever helped in the justice system. Not in any way, shape, or form. They won't even listen because they don't care whether I'm tortured or tormented in my home or whether I live or die in this car. They don't care. And the help I needed was just a tiny sliver of the resources that are going to be devoted to putting this piece of garbage in prison. The next category is news media coverage. The news media was all over the Jayme Closs story from day one, from moment one. Absolutely all over it. You want to talk about exploiting her situation. That's not what I'm doing here. That's what the media was doing. We can get ratings. All right, a 13-year-old girl was kidnapped. Hot dog, we're in business. Let's get out there. Call the advertisers. We're jacking the rates for a while. And people watched it. They weren't watching these videos. Look at the views. 15 views, 20 views. They were watching this instead. Talk about exploiting a girl's suffering. The thing is, in her case, as horrific as it was, and it was a limited number of people who were affected. Her parents were dead. She had an immediate family, friends, neighbors, community. It was a limited number. It was a large number, but a limited number. And I'm not in any way discounting the pain they're suffering. It's horrific. But there was all that coverage nationally over something that affects a limited number of people. There are other people out there who have children abducted all the time. All the time. You don't see that kind of coverage there, do you? And in fact, if anyone tries to come out and explain where some of those children might actually be going, they put the stomp on it because it might lead to leaders of government, things like that. But in this case, they covered it. That's all they did was cover the story, right? Her picture was plastered everywhere. You knew her picture I knew her picture better than I know any of these pop stars out there. You could throw Lady Gaga could walk out this door. I wouldn't know what she looks like in a million years. But if Jayme Closs did, I would know because her picture was there all the time. That's something I paid attention to because it mattered. And of course, it is good to have the news media cover these stories because it creates awareness so that someone, if they see her, they can help rescue her. That I understand. It's just why in this case did they do it, but in the thousands of other child abduction cases or missing children cases, they do nothing. Let alone, why did they do absolutely nothing when I'm living in a car for 4 years because all these Minnesotans broke the law, failed to do the jobs they accept a paycheck for doing, and didn't care if I lived or died? I don't know. The news media completely ignored my situation. And yet, my situation, when you're dealing with the way that neighbors treat other neighbors and the fact that you have all this negligence and corruption and incompetence in government, the sum total in my case was relevant to 5 million Minnesotans directly, because the same police serve those other Minnesotans. The same legislators, they don't serve them, they scam them. They're scamming the same 5 million Minnesotans. 5 million Minnesotans needed to know what happened to me because it is directly relevant to their lives. The media not only wouldn't cover it, they just flat out refused to. But in this case, where there's a limited number of people affected by this girl's disappearance, the media's all over it. If you want to know why, ask how much they charge for the advertising. Point number 2. The media publicized the problem. They publicized progress. They publicized how to get a solution in the sense of showing the photo and saying, call this number if you have any tips. And then, now that the person's been caught and she's been rescued, they're publicizing the solution. So the media, the problem, progress to find a solution, publicizing how to get a solution from the people out there, the people who are watching can help create a solution, and now they're publicizing the solution itself. That's what the First Amendment was for. That's what the media is supposed to do. But not just once in a while. Not just when they see a girl who touches their heart because of her cute little picture. Again, thousands of other kids out there, they don't get the media helping to find them. 10,000 homeless people sleeping out in this cold that the Department of Health doesn't think hurts anybody, even though apparently it kills babies. The media has nothing to say about it. When I went to the media, they just flat out refused to cover it. In fact, if you could actually pin them down and talk to them face to face, which was very rare, but when I did, the smirk on their face, they just felt this power. Like, I can decide whether you live or die. I could do this story, and if I did a story, just because you're on the TV, you're suddenly going to get all the support from people who see you on the TV, and you're going to be rescued. But I have the power, and I'm not going to put you on the TV, so you go over there and just suffer and die off camera. That's the smirk that was on the face of these reporters I talked to. Off camera. And of course, the main reason in my case is because my story included so much information about negligence, incompetence, and corruption in our government, specifically Minnesota state government, particularly the legislature. Point number 3. The media emphasized the point that now, when this girl escapes, she goes running out in the middle of nowhere, right? There's all these cabins that are very isolated. She's out there freezing, wearing just baggy clothes, whatever she could find. She finds this random person walking her dog. As it turns out, let's see, just randomly, this person could have been a homeless person, for example, because I'm always stuck sitting in my car. If some girl ran up to me and said, I've been kidnapped, you know what? This camera would be laying on the floor and I'd be helping that girl. It could have been an off-duty police officer walking his dog. It could have been a school teacher. It could have been an airline pilot. It could have been anybody. As it turns out, in this case, for whatever reason, just random chance, it was a retired child service worker. So the media plays up the fact that a retired child service worker helped to rescue this girl. You know what? It was completely random. It's not because she's a retired child service worker. Child services destroy so many families and children's lives and steal so much money. That's a whole nightmare of its own. But they play it up because they want to play up this idea that the government is actually helping people on camera when the reality is different off camera. That lady could have been anything. They never should have mentioned what her job was. It doesn't matter. She was the person walking the dog when Jayme ran up and asked for help. What she did when she used to work, back when she used to work, she doesn't work now, is irrelevant. And to play that up, to try to make some kind of, emotional connection, try to make people think that somehow child services helped rescue her is sickening and disgusting. Child services destroys lives. Every once in a while they do help a child, absolutely. But you know what? So do just good and decent people if they actually do anything, which Minnesotans do not, because it's all about them. In my case, the analogy would be the news media is constantly praising homeless services and social services for what they do for the homeless, when the reality off camera is the complete polar opposite. These people are wasting money, squandering public resources, they're doing nothing to help the homeless, and they just take a token individual or family every once in a while that they can put up on a poster on television, and they're just sucking tax dollars dry. They do nothing but hurt people. These ridiculous social services. So you can see all these, how what happened with the Jayme Closs case has analogies, there's metaphors, there's similarities to what I've experienced. Even right there, they play up the fact that this woman who found her randomly was a child service worker in another life. Nothing to do with this case. But they play it up because they want you, the TV viewer, the dazed and confused TV viewer, they want you to think that child services is a good thing because it's part of big government, when in fact it hurts people. It damages lives. If you don't believe me, do some research, for heaven's sakes, because there's a lot of children being hurt by that and a lot of families being destroyed by it. Meanwhile, at the same token, they refuse to publicize my case because that would expose how corrupt and incompetent and negligent these social services really are. Next category is Jayme Closs herself. Point number one, she went through hell that she never asked for and she certainly did not deserve. She went through it for 3 months so far, and it's going to continue. Although it's not so much hell, it's recovery at this point. For me, I have gone through hell for so many years I can't even count it. 4 years of homelessness, and I can't even really pin down anymore how many years of being tortured and tormented by my neighbors I had to deal with while nobody would help me, even when it was their job to help me, even when they accepted a paycheck to supposedly do the job to help me, which they wouldn't do. Point number two, Jayme enjoyed the combined resources of state, the entire country, FBI, everything. The news media, all kinds of services and agencies, churches, and individual citizens. The combined resources of all of that, focused like a laser beam to save her. Me, in all the years I've gone through this, nothing. Nothing. No agencies, no government. I mean, remember the legislators? No, thank you. Send me your home address so I can write to you about your homelessness. That's what I've gotten. I don't get the combined, I don't get all these people combining churches and agencies and government and media to just end my homelessness so that my human suffering stops and stops forever. I don't get that. I get nothing. She got everything. And thank God she got everything. But she's the only one who got everything. All these thousands of other kids who get nothing. Nobody's out combining everything to help them. 10,000 homeless people, including the one you're watching right now, nobody does anything for. As far as individuals go, God bless them, God bless them, God bless them, the people who have helped me. But you know what? When I wrote that, I was trying to think of who they were. There's not even enough to count on these fingers. 5 million Minnesotans, and I can't even think of enough names to count on one hand. But God bless those who did try to help. Point number 3. This is a quote from a news story on the Jayme Closs case. Quote, "The squalid conditions Jayme endured during her captivity were abhorrent." Have you seen my other videos to see how I live in this car? The filthy and squalid third world conditions that I've experienced for the last 4 years, I can't even describe. It needs to be experienced to even have the foggiest idea what I'm trying to explain to people. I'll leave it at that. Here's another quote from another news story. Quote, "The skinny, dirty state that her rescuer found her in suggests that she was badly mistreated." Take a look at me, please. Would you please look at me? It's a shame you can't smell me, too. I'm not skinny, but you know what? Right now I have a job, so I'm able to eat. It ain't good food I'm eating because I can't prepare my own food. I haven't had prepared food in years, other than occasional restaurant or whatever. But I am dirty, I'm filthy, I can't maintain my hygiene, especially after the Minnesota Department of Health took away the hotel I could afford where I maintained my hygiene. Now, in this case, what they're saying is the condition of being dirty and malnourished and things like that, undernourished, that they found her in, suggests that she was badly mistreated. Now, how could that suggest that she's badly mistreated, but when you see the situation I'm in, that doesn't suggest that I'm badly mistreated or that I'm in an unjust situation? How does that work exactly? Why? Is it just because she's a 13-year-old girl? When a 13-year-old girl is malnourished and she's dirty, that suggests that she was badly mistreated. But when a 51-year-old man is in the same situation, that does not suggest that he's badly mistreated. Do you see the problem there? You can't have it both ways. I was badly mistreated by all these people who did nothing to prevent me from being here and nothing to help me once I got here. Because I asked for their help over and over and over and over again. And they didn't help. Here's another quote from another story. Quote, "In the cluttered basement where she was held captive, all of the drop ceiling tiles appeared to be missing and the windows were taped, not properly insulated against the harsh Wisconsin winter." This place, I believe, is 80 miles away from where I am right now. When they talk about the harsh Wisconsin winter, it's the same thing I'm sitting in right here, the harsh Minnesota winter. It's the same thing. Windows were not taped or properly insulated against the harsh weather. How long have I made videos showing how, as this car rusts away from beneath, the holes in here equalize the temperature in this car with what's going on outside, whether it's 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 below zero, no matter what. What's going on in this car matches what is going on outside within minutes. Not hours, minutes. How is that different than what they just described? Because here they're saying it's a bad thing. With me, it's okay. Apparently, I mean, no one's helping, so it must not be a bad thing, right? No, the Department of Health isn't helping. They didn't do anything. They threw me out into the cold, you see. The legislators didn't care. They just said, no thank you. I've got better things to do. Like going to their cabins, for example. They're the ones who own those cabins up in western Wisconsin, by the way. Minnesota legislators, people like that. That's where most of those cabin owners come from, by the way, if you're not familiar with the area. So in other words, this pile of human garbage's neighbors were the very kinds of people who, the very people, I should say, who I have gone to for assistance, who didn't care if I lived or died. So in her case, it's a problem that there was not proper insulation during the harsh winter. In my case, I have no insulation whatsoever. If I can't fall asleep right away, I can't fall asleep at all, because my nose gets freezing cold and starts dripping, my ears freeze up, I start shivering, and I'm not going to sleep. So I have to start up the car again, burn some more gas, breathe some more fumes, and try to heat it up again, and hope that the next time I'll fall asleep before it gets too cold. But even if I fall asleep, the cold wakes up my body automatically to prevent me from dying. You see. Now I've got, just in case you're wondering, I'm going to show you one more time. Here we go again. How long did it take? They started moving when I break the camera up. They've been sitting there staring at me. Now you can see there's nothing here. There's nothing here. This is an empty parking lot, and these cars pull up right and just sit there and face me. That's how they treat the homeless out here. And they just sit there and they try to intimidate you. And as soon as I grab that camera, they started moving again. You people have no idea what I deal with. You don't even understand it. In fact, I'll give you another example. Before I made this video, I had to use the restroom, which I have to do frequently. Especially when you're sitting in this position almost 24 hours a day if it's not a work day. I'm just sitting in this car, in this seat, with my circulation cut off, trying to drink warm drinks to stay warm. So I had to go to the bathroom. What do? To get to this bathroom, the nearest bathroom I can get to is run by the government. Yay! I have to park about 50 yards away, so I have to start the car, burn some gasoline, go over there. I can only get maybe 50 yards close to it. I have to go out in the cold and walk, which I'm dressed for inside a car that has a heater, so when I step outside it's this cold. I have to walk through a gang of Somali warlords out there. This area of Minnesota, they've brought in all these Somalis, and they give them money, they give them cars, they give them homes. They don't have jobs. I mean, they're just goofing around all day, every day, and they're really snotty about it. And they're really snotty about it. I have had them basically say, well, not so much say, they can't really speak, but they've more or less made it perfectly clear that they think it's hilarious that an American citizen is enduring this while they're getting all these freebies. Let me put it that way. They think it's hilarious. They think it's such a joke how they're just pulling the wool over everyone's eyes here. They think it is hilarious that an American citizen is suffering in these conditions while all the money that could have helped me is instead going to these people to do nothing. They don't even work for a living. So I have to walk through that group. I go into the bathroom, government-run bathroom. There's no toilet paper. So while I'm doing my business, one of these Somalis comes in there, and he's just shouting in whatever language. So I'm like, oh great, there they are on the phone again. I have to listen to that nonsense. So I do my stuff, and just all the time. And I walk out there, and the guy's just looking at me like, he didn't have a phone, he didn't have an earpiece. This guy's yelling at me the whole time. He's a nut job. This guy was insane. And the government's paying for him. That's what I had to do to go to the bathroom this one time. I have to go to the bathroom many times each day. And every time I have to find a bathroom, and I have to go through that kind of effort to use it. What do you have to do if you have to go to the bathroom right now? Perhaps walk in your bare feet 15 feet and just use the bathroom peacefully and come back and continue this video? 4 years, that's what I've had to do every time I want to use a restroom somewhere. You people have absolutely no idea what this is like. You have no idea what suffering is. That's just to use the bathroom. Point number 6. Jayme is now getting justice. Everyone's devoted to making sure that this Jake Patterson never breathes fresh air, never walks the earth again, never hurts anyone again. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. But she's getting justice. She's getting full justice. The perpetrators in my case got away scot-free. And I'm not exaggerating, they were not even looked at funny by any other person. Nobody cared. For the pain and suffering they caused me, torturing me in my own home for all those years. Those people never got a talking to. No one looked at them funny. No one sent them a letter. No one visited them. No one pointed out the fine print of our lease that they were violating. No one pointed out the statutes and laws that they were breaking. Nobody did anything. They got away with it scot-free. The people who were supposed to, who accepted paychecks for having jobs to help me so that I can't be in that situation, the law enforcement, the legislators, the lawyers, these so-called professionals in Minnesota, these lawyers when my landlord can just pick and choose from our lease whatever he wants. Okay, here's the part about you have to pay me. I'm going to keep that one. But the whole big long paragraph about how you have to be respectful of your neighbors and you cannot make noise after this time of night and all that stuff, I'm just going to ignore that part because it doesn't affect me. I don't live on the site. It only affects you, Paul. So I'm not going to do anything about that particular part of the lease. Nobody help me. There has not been anything that even resembles justice in my case. I can't, the word justice has no meaning anymore for me. And yet Jayme is going to get complete and total justice. And by the way, in my case, even when the perpetrators are consuming and squandering public resources, like all these fake social services, homeless services, like those legislators who don't do their jobs, and off camera they just write back to someone who they're supposed to be helping and they just say, no thank you. Those people get reelected. They are squandering all these Minnesotans' tax dollars, all their public resources. There's nothing that even resembles justice. And I need to point out too that unlike Jayme, as much as she's going to have to deal with going forward and recover from, one thing she's not going to have to go through her whole life feeling like there was no justice. I have to go the rest of my life forever and ever, for all of eternity, knowing that no one even tried for justice in my case. Not even once. Didn't even care. I have to spend the rest of my eternity in this universe knowing that there wasn't even an attempt for justice in my case because nobody cared. And I can never, ever get rid of that because it's the truth. Point number 7. If under some circumstance a GoFundMe is created for Jayme, she's going to be a millionaire. Because she was on the TV. If someone creates a GoFundMe for her, she will be a millionaire. One of the first things I did when I became homeless was create a GoFundMe, and I asked for very little money. A couple $1,000s, because that would have solved the problem then. I got nothing. I got 0 donations. And so that's about what I've had since then. I just need a couple $1,000s because early on. That would have. Now what I need is just so far gone. I'll never get what I need now. It can't happen. That's how it builds up and accumulates. Point number 8. Jayme lost her immediate close family forever. Her parents. They're gone forever and ever and ever. But she still has a strong extended family and strong family support. In my case, I lost my entire family. Both of my parents died within a year of each other, about a year or two before all this nightmare in my apartment life began. My mom died, and then I would dare say my father died of a broken heart. I don't have family. I don't have any family. People will do absolutely nothing. They're always looking for a reason to blame the victim, at least in Minnesota. So if I get an opportunity to even tell my story to someone, it's like they're going to punish me for making them sit and listen to the reality that they don't want to hear. It's like, I don't want to hear this. This is happening to someone else. I don't want to hear it. It might make me feel bad. So they punish you if you do get them somewhere where you tell them anything extended about your story. They punish you for it. And one way they do it is they'll say things like, well, why don't you just do this or that or the other thing, which is their way of like using rhetoric and manipulative language to try to make it look like this is all your fault. And the first thing out of their mouth is, well, why don't you just go to your family for help? I don't have any family. That's why. And Jayme no longer has any parents either, does she? But she has a wonderful, what I can tell, it looks like a wonderful, strong, extended family that's giving her all the support she needs and then some, and thank God for that. Now, here's a quote from a news report. This is from Jayme's uncle. He said, quote, "She's got one hell of a family behind her. She will never be alone." For Jayme's sake, I couldn't be more happy to hear that, because that's what she needs more than anything. Thank God she has that. Thank God she has that. But in my case, I have no family. And what homeless people experience, the word alone doesn't even, it doesn't suffice. There is no word for the kind of, not even loneliness, but the solitude, the aloneness, when everyone around you just looks at you like you're a leper or something all of a sudden. You're the exact same person except you don't have a home, and all of a sudden people who were trying to get your autograph the day before now look at you like, ew, or they do some stunt like these cars you keep seeing do to me all the time. They just pull up and try to intimidate you because you're sitting out by yourself, and they don't, makes them feel uncomfortable. Oh my God, there's a homeless guy sitting in a car. We got to get rid of this guy. Let's go just give him the business. Which is what kids in a playground do, for God's sake. These are adults. These are Minnesota adults. No, homelessness gives a new meaning to the word alone. Thank God Jayme's not going to experience that. But I need to point out the fact that she's not going to experience it. But I experience it every day. I pointed out earlier, point 10, I think I already went over this though, people were horrified that Jayme was malnourished, emaciated, and unkempt, which means she was not able to maintain her hygiene. They were horrified that she was in that situation, and they sought to rectify the situation, to feed her, to clothe her, to warm her, to allow her to maintain her hygiene. That's what they did. With me, I can go to a church. Yeah, do you have a shower in there where I could take a shower? I'm homeless and I'm very dirty. Oh, we're sorry, the insurance won't allow us to do, or no, we don't have one, even as I see the pastor walk out of a room all wet with his towel and all this. When it happens to a 13-year-old girl, apparently not having any good food, not being able to, like for instance in my case, not being able to prepare my own food for 4 years and just eating garbage from convenience stores for 4 years, having my teeth just rot out of my mouth because I have no way to maintain my hygiene. And then when I had a place to maintain hygiene for a day and a half of every week in this hotel, the Department of Health, of all places, throws us all out so that I have no place to maintain my hygiene. Do you do this? Let me ask you this. Do you do this? This is my pocket in my pants. Look what I keep in my pocket. A toothbrush. Because I never know when I'm out there. Most people are out there and they're thinking, they're walking around and they're like, I never know when, maybe I'll meet the man or the woman of my dreams, I could be walking down the street and bam, it just hits you. For me, it's like, I never know if maybe bam, the opportunity to brush my teeth will finally present itself out of nowhere. So I got to carry a toothbrush with me so I can do it if I ever get that opportunity. And they were horrified that Jayme's in that situation. But when it happens to me, nobody cares. When it happens to 10,000 homeless people out here, nobody cares. Least of all, the Minnesota Department of Health. Nuremberg is the answer to people like that. Human monsters. Indeed, the state of Minnesota, these wonderful legislators with their cabins out near this guy who kidnapped the girl, they spent all their money building a football stadium for a private football team, not a private business. They built a football stadium. What they did not build were competent homeless shelters that were not a bunch of self-serving nightmares like they have right now. They didn't even build hygiene facilities for the homeless. So we have nothing. 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 When's the last time you brushed your teeth using snow? It hurts your teeth because it's very cold. I'll just save you the trouble, since you'll probably never do it. Point number 11, Elizabeth Smart. This is the girl who was kidnapped for 3 months by a homeless person of all things, right? Remember back in Salt Lake City, I think must have been 2001. Yeah, 2001. She was kidnapped and married and repeatedly raped by this guy and his wife. And everyone played it up as this guy is homeless. He's not homeless, he's just a vagrant bum. Homeless means you don't have a home, but it doesn't mean you're a bum. I work harder than anyone I know. Last thing I am is a bum. This guy wanted to be homeless. I don't. I want a home. This guy wanted that life. He kidnapped Elizabeth Smart way back then. So ever since then, she's been, using her celebrity status from that for some good things and some not so good things. But the good things she's doing are pretty good. She has an organization to help people reunite with families when they get separated, especially when it comes to like a child abduction or something. And that's a great thing. I'm not really a fan of everything she's doing. But Elizabeth Smart has already spouted off and chimed in on this case. She's already got out in the media, and she'll get it. If she says, "Hi, I'm Elizabeth Smart. I want the news media to point a bunch of cameras at me and then broadcast what I say to the masses," it'll happen. It'll just happen. If I go up there and say, "Hi, I'm Paul. Here, I've got a story here. I'd like one camera to broadcast, hopefully so some masses will see it," they won't even touch it. But Elizabeth Smart, yeah, because she was kidnapped for several months. I've been in this for 4 years. So Elizabeth Smart has already come out standing up for Jayme Closs. The interesting thing is, when Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped, I was in Salt Lake City. I worked there during the Olympics, and that's when that happened, 2001 Olympics. I was just moving away from there to California right after she got kidnapped. So when I drove from Salt Lake City to California, they had posters all over the place. Again, family, friends, community, government, agencies, actually trying to save a human life. Everywhere I went, there were these posters. Elizabeth Smart, have you seen her? Have you seen her? And I remember pulling into a rest area somewhere in Nevada, northern Nevada. And these flyers were like ripped and down and all that. And I went up and I found a way to get those flyers back up there. Because I wanted people to see those flyers, because it might be the person who sees that flyer that would know where she is and be able to save her life. I mean, it's a humble gesture, yes, but I was not in a position to go out and hunt for her kidnapper. I was not law enforcement. But it occurred to me to take the time and the effort. It didn't occur to the other people in that rest stop because the things were all torn and ripped and stuff like that. No one else seemed to care. They just walked by But it occurred to me to take her posters and put them up there so that maybe that would be a poster that would help this girl be found. And because I cared. Even if I can't do anything directly, I cared. And if there's something you can do, you do it. So I did. But then when I went through all this, after the first several years of this, I created that website. And the website talked about what happened to me in Minnesota. It talked about the corruption and everything, but it had a whole section that was about trauma and the effect of trauma on people. Physically, psychologically, emotionally. And the trauma that I experienced comes from oh, sorry, I lost power here. From everything I've experienced, you can't imagine the kind of trauma. Look what I just told you about, just what it takes to go to the bathroom. And that's just one simple thing out of one day, out of 4 years, which is less than the 7 or 8 years that I've actually dealt with the whole issue, back when I had the apartment and those nightmarish neighbors. When I had all that done in my research, and I did a lot of research on this, a lot of research, very good research, and when I was talking about trauma on my website, I looked for other instances of severe trauma, immediate trauma, similar types of trauma. And one of those was the kind of thing that Elizabeth Smart went through. Being kidnapped, being deprived of her family, being deprived of her home, being suddenly treated in a completely different manner than she was accustomed to, because this guy treated her like a slave. Those are the things that happened to me. So we had similarities. So among so many others, I mean, I certainly didn't focus on her. I wrote to her one time, just one time. Among all the many people, like the Minnesota Department of Health, who didn't care. They didn't respond. They couldn't have cared less. That's only a health concern. Why would the Department of Health care anything about that? You see what I'm dealing with here. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? The Department of Health never responded when I informed them about this health issue. Nuremberg. So I wrote to Elizabeth Smart, and I just pointed out the website, and I said, I'd like to get your permission to use, I can't remember what it was, but I wanted to use something. I'd like to get your permission to use this on my site because there's similarities in the kind of trauma that homeless people, at least in some circumstances, experience versus what you did. Here's my website where you can look at that. I never heard a word from her. She never wrote back. And, that's okay. I mean, she's one person, I at the time, I honestly didn't know she was a celebrity. I didn't know she had, the books and the millions of dollars and TV shows and and she could just stand up and say, hi camera, come and point at me, and it would come and point at her. I didn't realize that. I thought she was just kind of doing something to help out with people who get, separated from their families. But she never wrote back, and that's fine. I mean, there's no obligation for her to write back. I mean, but she didn't write back. Even though what I had an incredible trauma behind it, and a couple years of very, very intense research where I worked really, really hard to get what I was presenting to her, and she didn't respond. Okay, maybe she didn't even get the email. I don't know. Whatever. I don't hold it against her, but she didn't respond. But with Jayme, she didn't just respond. Jayme's right out there, or Elizabeth Smart's right out there on TV. She's using her celebrity to do everything she can to help this girl. Once again, to help this girl. But nothing to help me when I went to her. And granted, I couldn't do anything more than help when she was that age and she was actually kidnapped. I couldn't do more than help restore her posters to hope that maybe that would help get her rescued, but at least I did something. But I didn't even get a response when I emailed Elizabeth Smart. Jayme doesn't have to worry about that. Jayme can go on a trip to Vegas with Elizabeth Smart. And again, there's some other things Elizabeth does that I don't like, but I think the organization to help people reunite with their families, I think that's a wonderful thing and much needed. And she's going to do it a whole lot better than the government ever could. All right. So that's the point there. Okay, the next category is the perpetrator. This guy's name is Jake Patterson. By all accounts, he was antisocial, humorless loner. Me. I am very social. Not a social butterfly, certainly not a partier, but I'm very social. I like people, especially humor and joking. I love humor. You wouldn't know it from these videos because I'm suffering and dying, for God's sakes. But get me out into the real world under some normal circumstances, yeah, I'm known as the comedian. Absolutely. And while I do love my isolation to the extent that it's good for creative purposes, I like to be alone for the purposes of thinking, studying, researching, creating. But in the end, I have always much preferred there's a certain thrill to a teamwork that is a success versus just your own accomplishment. I've written books, probably the hardest work I've ever done in my life. I've written 3 books. They never got published. No one cared about the topics. Turns out the topics were kind of prophetic, but hey, whatever, that's the publishing business. They didn't care. But it was really, really hard work. It was a nice accomplishment. But you know what? I'm more proud of the stuff I did with teams, even in a band. When I was in rock and roll bands, when you nail it and you're just working together perfectly and just bam, bam, everything's on. It's such a wonderful feeling. So I'm certainly not some humorless loner, antisocial. I'm a very social person who is not allowed to socialize with anyone anymore over the last 4 years, for what it's worth. I'm a complete social outcast. So this guy's an antisocial loner. I'm a social being, especially when it comes to humor. I love humor. Second, according to a fellow student, this Patterson guy, he was, quote, very smart, but he didn't apply himself. He was very lazy. That's this guy. Now with me, the total opposite. I don't watch television. I don't waste my time on trivial entertainment of any kind. I'm always doing something. I'm hyper motivated, if anything. Any job I've been at, I am, if not the best worker, right at the top. Usually the most motivated, usually the hardest working, usually working the most hours. In my current job, I worked more hours than anyone else there out of, what, 100 some odd people last year. I worked more hours, including my bosses. I worked more hours. I'm not a lazy bum. I'm homeless, but I'm not a lazy bum by any stretch of the imagination. This guy was a lazy bum. This guy apparently couldn't hold a job for more than one shift before he felt the need to quit. One shift. I live in a car, and I'm out there begging for overtime. And I did that when I had a home, by the way. When I was on salary, I would still be the one who goes in on weekends. If the job needed to be done, I would get it done. I didn't get paid extra for it. That's called a work ethic. It's something Minnesotans don't get, and this guy is basically a Minnesotan for what it's worth. So, okay. Have it your way, buddy. Huh. So he was unemployed. All right, what's the problem with that? And the problem is, the reason he could kidnap a girl like that and hold her captive is because he had a home. He doesn't apply himself. He's lazy. He's a lazy bum. He has no job. He can't hold a job for more than a day. And this guy had a home. Not just a home, but while they're portraying it as this squalid dump and everything, that's because he didn't keep it up. But from what I can tell, the cabin he's in, if he had kept it up, was a pretty nice place. Nice, isolated place, 2.5 acres of land, 2-story cabin. Do you know what someone like me could do with a place like that? I'm a musician, for heaven's sakes. I couldn't even do much music production where I was before because it all had to be through headphones. I couldn't do any drums, period. I had sold my drum set. If I had this guy's place, I could play drums, I could do all the recordings, all the songs and albums I've wanted to make, all the stuff. All the writing I want to get done, I could just sit down and focus and write because I wouldn't have neighbors torturing and tormenting me 24/7 like I did in the apartment I was paying for. So, because of all that, I end up homeless, and this guy has a free 2-story cabin on 2.5 acres of land. And he's a complete lazy bum. This actually makes sense to Minnesotans, though. This is the problem here. This is what I can't seem to get across in these videos. Minnesotans, that scenario makes sense to them. A lazy, good-for-nothing, degenerate bum can have a home as long as there's some other reason for it, such as he's part of our cult. Even if he's a piece of human garbage, he should have a home. But when an outsider like me, someone who moves to Minnesota from a normal place, I'm not allowed to have a home. And there's nobody in the state who's going to help me get a home. Because the way they view it is, you're an outsider of the cult of Minnesota. You're not entitled to a home. You're not really human in their eyes. I'm not really human. But I'm nothing like this guy. He's kidnapping little girls. He's going in and murdering parents in front of their child in cold blood. He doesn't even know these people. But in Minnesota's twisted minds, because of this cult mentality, since he's apparently one of these Scandinavian descendants, he's by birth a part of the cult, he's entitled to have a home. Even if he doesn't have a job, I'm not entitled to have even the ability to go out and get a freaking hotel room when I have a job because the Department of Health shuts down the hotel. This makes sense to Minnesotans. I don't know how to emphasize this point enough. If you don't experiencing it yourself, it sounds so absurd that you're going to sit there and say, well, what about this and what about that and why didn't you just this? And there's no way to win. There's no way to win, because if that's going to be your response, instead of, what I wish is that you would just experience it. Take 4 years of your life and experience what I am, and go ask social services for help, and make sure they know that you were not born in Minnesota. See what happens. This guy had a home, and you know what? After he committed those horrific crimes, stalking this girl, murdering her parents in cold blood in front of her, kidnapping her, who knows what else he did to her. This guy is going to be treated, courtesy of this culture out here, the Minnesota, Wisconsin, this Scandinavian cult that runs this area. This piece of garbage is going to be treated to a free bed, warm bed, food, hygiene, healthcare, education, and entertainment for the rest of his natural life on this earth. Paid for by me. Because I work, I pay taxes. I'm going to pay for this guy's home in this prison. You are going to pay for this guy's home with your taxes. And guess what? Jayme is going to pay for this guy's warm bed, food, clothing, hygiene, healthcare, education, entertainment for the rest of his life. Jayme's going to pay for it with her taxes. And this makes rational sense to these Minnesotans. Wisconsin, the whole, the whole cult, whatever. Call it Minnesota, call it American Scandanavia, call it whatever you want. So this guy grows up as this piece of garbage. He has a nice home the whole time. He does something horrific, and his punishment for it is to be given another home with free food, apparently better food than he was eating in this house he had, better hygiene. Everything's going to be better for him, actually, from what I can tell. And he doesn't have to pay a dime for it, doesn't have to work for it. Meanwhile, I'm out working more harder than anyone else out there, and I'm living in a car. And the Department of Health takes away the only thing I had for 1.5 days every week I could stay in that hotel. So this guy's a complete loser, and yet his punishment is a reward. If you watch my videos, if you could see my website, if I hadn't lost the website even, I got so poor at one point, you would see that through all of this I have done everything right. Not just have I done it right, but I have determined from the beginning I'm going to do this right. I am going to obey every law. I'm going to complete every form I'm supposed to. I'm going to do what I need to do within, my ethics. When they present me with a form that's unethical at these homeless shelters, I will not fill it out, obviously. But I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to work. I'm going to ask for a job before I ask for a bed. I'm going to do things right, and I have. I have done it all through this whole period. You cannot even compare me to this pile of human garbage, this Jake Patterson. We are polar opposites in our personality. He's a loner, I'm social, he's lazy, I'm incredibly hardworking and motivated. There's no comparison between the two of us. And yet, this guy's punishment is a reward of free everything for the rest of his life. And my reward for being a good person is to be punished with being deprived of everything, apparently, for the rest of my life. And this makes sense to Minnesotans because they're doing nothing about it. These videos are right here. I've gone to these people. They won't do anything about it. Therefore, it seems pretty obvious that they're perfectly comfortable with it. They feel that is good and just. They feel that that makes sense. Likewise, the perpetrators in my case, the neighbors who tortured and tormented me, no punishment whatsoever. If anything, they got rewarded. They got rewarded by having me, the only person who's a good tenant, chased out of the place so they could have their degenerate party without anyone around. The landlord got rewarded. He got the same thing. He got to get rid of me so that he didn't have one person complaining about this horrific stuff that's going on. And even though he's breaking the law in the process, but he did it, and then he can jack up the rent for the next person, so he's making more money. He got rewarded. He didn't get punished. The legislators who were so irresponsible that they would write back, "No, thank you," to someone who's asking them to help save his life, they get reelected. they get rewarded. I'm done talking about this. If you don't see what I'm getting at with this video yet, please never come back to my channel, ever. Just don't. There's no point to it. If this video doesn't make it clear to you what I have suffered is just absolute injustice every which way to Sunday, and that this is something that it could happen somewhere else potentially, but it's very likely to happen in Minnesota or Wisconsin, you know, the Scandinavian cult, precisely because this is a cult mentality that runs this part of the country. If you can't figure that out yet from this, when you see what's going on here, then just forget it. So the last thing I just want to point out is how much my heart goes out to Jayme, especially for the loss of her parents. That there's something I can relate to that she's experienced. She lost them so early, and she's going to have that image in her mind for the rest of her life. I wish there was something to remove that image from her mind. I wish her nothing but the best, but I have to tell you, based on my experience here, I am terrified that the worst is yet to come for her. And the reason is because there's going to be an army of government, academic, social workers, and child services, all of these psychopaths who enter these social service because they're always trying to be someone else's parent. They're trying to take care of someone else, tell someone else what to do. You know, that's why they pass all these laws out here. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't swim. You know, I've got a big sign, you're not allowed to swim here. You're an adult human being. This is a huge planet. But when you're in our jurisdiction, we tell you, ultimately at gunpoint, you can't swim here. Because we're just telling you, you can't swim here. We tell you what to do. You see, we're your parents. They dress all these poor sad sack workers in here in these little yellow jackets and vests. The government even dresses these people. They're adults. An army of these people is going to descend upon Jayme to try to save her. They're going to help her. They're going to help her recover. And they're going to screw her up for the rest of her life. The thing I am most terrified about is what these people are going to do to her. Because they don't know what they're doing. They can't even take care of their own life. How can they take care of hers? Look at the kind of people who go into psychology and social work and stuff like that. They're always someone who's trying to make up for something that happened to them. The people who've helped me are the ones, and they're never in those kinds of organizations. They're doing something completely different. They're a business person or something. It's always someone who just plain cares about other people. Those are the ones who actually do help you. But the ones who come out and they make it their profession to help you, they're screwed up beyond help themselves. God protect Jayme from those people. From these government psychologists and social workers who are going to try to help her. They're going to mangle her for the rest of her life. I'm telling you right now, what someone like that needs, I mean, all through human history, they've had these kinds of disasters and catastrophes and tragedies. And people have dealt with it and they move on. First things first, you have to get her away from the problem, which they've done. She's no longer a captive of this guy. She's now with a good, supportive family. Got her friends back. And I hope her friends will treat her normally and not treat her like she's different or broken or damaged goods, because she isn't. She appears to be a wonderful, sweet girl, and again, I can't praise her enough for having the courage to escape this guy, because if she hadn't, no one else was going to find her. She saved her life. That's a will to live that I can relate to, sitting in this car making these videos so that I can talk to people who don't care if I live or die. I can relate to her on that one. What she needs is to be with her family, to be left alone, to have this sick and twisted media take the cameras away now, because the job's done, she's safe. Get away, quit exploiting her, quit trying to make money off of her. Leave her alone so she can get back a normal life the best she's able to. Her family and friends will help her do that. The only exception is possibly Elizabeth Smart's group that helps people reunite with families, because there you're dealing with people who have actually experienced it, not these psychopaths who go to college to study psychology or social work because they got their own problems and they need to take control over someone else's life. I hope she gets what she needs, and I hope these government people do not screw up the rest of her life, because you know what? They'll do it off camera. The big part of this is over. There's going to be a trial, but for the most part, her star is going to start, declining. Everything's going to happen off camera, and while she's sitting in rooms with these monsters, these lunatics, psychologists and psychiatrists, and oh, God forbid they would put her on any drugs, which is their answer to everything. Let's just get her hooked on this drug. This'll calm her down. Let's give her some Prozac. Let's give her... I am terrified for her future, and it's because of our government and the people who claim to help her. Her family will help her. Look at how much love they've shown this girl. That is my prayer for this girl, is that government will not destroy the rest of her life while helping her the way they've destroyed so many lives while claiming to help people. That's the end of my notes. I hope they move her to a different part of the country. She needs to experience what normality is like. She needs to be around normal people. I mean, not perfect people. There's still good and bad everywhere, but there's a certain parity in other cultures. You don't have a dominant subculture running the area that is just utterly degenerate like you do in Minnesota. I mean, you'll have bad people and kidnappers in any state of the country, obviously. But she's got to get out from the umbrella of this psychopathic social regime they have out here. That's all I have to say on the subject. I know I'm speaking to myself. Any of you who've lasted this long are probably just sitting there waiting to get to the comment section so you can blast me a new one. Whatever. I'm an easy target. Just like she was. That's all I have to say.